Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today we will be looking at this document that you have in front of you, the Revolutionary Essay Outline. So this will be what we intend to complete in class today. We're going to talk about each paragraph individually. We're going to break it down, and then I'm going to let you work on your own. And I'm going to meet with all of you individually or in pairs to talk about your papers. So that's what we're going to do today. I want to start with paragraph 1. So please have this out and follow along with me. So the first thing that you want to do is set up your paper. So set up the topic, what you're going to be talking about. And basically that comes from the prompt, from the question. You believe that the policies of your government are unjust and oppressive. The policies favor a small wealthy class, but the vast majority of people are poor with few rights. The government has failed to tackle social and political problems. And here's the key. This is your question that you're answering, that your thesis, which we're going to work on, must answer. So this is the key. You want to make sure that this first paragraph effectively addresses this question. So what we're doing right now with the thesis and with the introduction paragraph is we're laying that foundation. A quick message from our sponsors today.
A successful hardscape project starts with a well-prepared foundation. Now, in the previous video in this series,
Exactly. A well-prepared foundation. That's what we need for our papers. That's what you need for any home project. So let's look at the first paragraph. What I've asked you to do is explain the topic and be sure to explain the idea of violence versus nonviolence. So basically that's a summary of what you're going to talk about. So I want to look at a good example and a bad example of that done. So let's look at the bad example first. In this example, it's clarified the government is unjust in my country. The people are oppressed. Throughout history, people have responded to this situation with violence and nonviolence. So we've accomplished some of the things we need to accomplish, but we need to be much more specific. If you look at the second paragraph, that idea gets to it much more specifically. Throughout history, there have been many examples of violent and nonviolent revolutions. These revolutions have a similar aim: to overthrow the existing power structure that rules through unjust and unequal ways. Revolutionaries generally represent the oppressed and the lower class people within a country, while those with power represent the oppressors who have control of the wealth and power. Revolutionary groups that use violence will experience extreme resistance as they attempt to overthrow the established power structure, but nonviolence will experience the same resistance through their methodologies as well. So that's the setup piece, and that'll address these two boxes here. So what you want to do first is just go through, think about those boxes, think about what you know, who are the people of revolutions, who is against who, and you're going to set up your foundation of the paper. And then you're going to move on to the thesis. And the thesis is the most important part. You must have a strong thesis. You must nail the thesis. Okay? Now, in order to do so, your thesis, it needs to answer the question, take a position, violence or nonviolence, and then you need to explain why that will be more effective to bring about change, which is our driving question here. So let's take a look at two theses. Thesi, I'm not sure. Theses. Here's our first one. I believe nonviolence is better because it works. Alright, that's a position, yes, but it doesn't tell us why nonviolence is better. So we do not want to use that. Okay, we do not want to use that type of thesis. It needs to be a strong, defendable statement, such as this second one. So this thesis statement, let's isolate it, make it big so it stands alone. Woo! There we go. So remember, we talked about how both methodologies will result in violence, but the author here says, however, I believe violent revolutions in the end will result in quicker, more long-lasting change for a country that will bring political stability and economic equality. All right. There's a statement that you can defend throughout your paper. It doesn't say nonviolence is better. It does say that, but it says, or I'm sorry, it doesn't say violence is better. It does say that, but it says more. It says why violence is better. So you want to make sure when you're working with your thesis that it takes that strong stance and it says why. And that's it. So I want you to start by beginning working on your thesis and this opening paragraph, and I will start meeting with some of you to go over that paragraph. All right, knock it out. So,
I have a question for you.
all right, now that we've got a strong thesis, we're going to move on to our body paragraphs. These are the evidence paragraphs, okay? This is where we let them know we can support our thesis through evidence and then defend it. Yep, evidence. That's what we need, like DJ Premier. So, in your position statement, you want to make sure, and this is the formula here that's going to get you to where you want to be. Position statement plus supporting evidence plus analysis of evidence. That's the formula. So, first, you got to think, all right, what's my main event going to be? The main idea that I'm going to talk about. So let's say I'm going to talk about Gandhi's nonviolence movement in India. Okay? Now, I'm going to take a position, but remember, in working with the paragraph that I've been working with, I'm against nonviolence being most effective, so I have to keep that in mind as I work with my position statement. So, keeping this idea in mind that I'm in favor of violence, I would want to say something, and keeping my thesis in mind, that long-lasting change for a country will result from violence as opposed to nonviolence. I would say Gandhi's nonviolence movement in India brought about political change, but the process took way too long. And that's fine for our position statement. That relates to my thesis, it supports my thesis, and it's not as strong as my thesis, but that's okay because I'm going to get more into the analysis here. Okay? So then I would go on to explain what happened in Gandhi's nonviolence movement. I would talk about boycotts, strikes, and how he accomplished what he did. I would make sure to set it up. Who is he fighting against? I'd explain the British Empire and the power struggle. Okay. Then I talk about boycott strikes and how he accomplished what he did, and then I just explain what he actually accomplished. And let me show you that. Let me copy and paste something real quick. So I talk about here. I'm going to take this. He preached nonviolence because he believed that this gave a more powerful voice as they responded peacefully to their violent colonial oppressors. Gandhi's movement was successful and eventually would result in new laws and eventually the independence of India. But here's the kicker. And we'll talk about this in a second. So let me take part of this throw it over here. So I explained what Gandhi accomplished. Here, Gandhi's movement was successful and eventually would result in new laws and eventually the independence of India. But then I conclude with an analysis. So I bring my thesis back into it. I analyze what he did, and then I make sure that that evidence that I just presented is explained and it supports my thesis. So it says, however, Gandhi's method exhausted the people himself and the movement took decades, whereas a violent revolution could have accomplished the same aims in a much shorter time. So this statement has now analyzed my evidence, what I presented, Gandhi's nonviolence movement in India, and it further explains my position statement at the beginning of the paragraph. So that is a strong use of evidence to drive our thesis, to drive the argument here. And then when I come down here to paragraph 3, now I'm set up to talk about a violent revolution and how it took less time yet was still successful and was still successful. So now I could pick any event. Let's say the Petrograd. Let's say I take the Petrograd strike and the Russian Revolution. That becomes my main idea, and then just like we did in paragraph 2, I'd explain what happened and make sure that I talk about the Petrograd strike in my topic sentence. So, Petrograd strike that began the Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution, I'll just rework this, took less time for the revolutionaries to achieve their goals. I'm just going to leave it at that. And that would work. And now I'm set up to talk about the Petrograd strike. Again, I'm going to explain it, explain what happened, what did it accomplish, and then I'm going to conclude by analyzing my evidence and making sure that it supports my thesis. So that's evidence. That's evidence. That's you. That's what you're going to do.
Yo, who's the one that's been running the race?
You. You're going to run that race. All right? Finish strong. Evidence. That means it's time for the conclusion. So you've got 1, 2, 3 done. Like Michael said, 1, 2, 3. We're almost there. We just need 4. So I want to take a look at the 4th paragraph and what you need to do. First off, you want to restate your thesis with concluding terminology. So you're not stating the thesis in the exact same way, but in the same manner. So in conclusion, revolutionary change can result from both violent and nonviolent methods. However, the needs of a country oftentimes require rapid change as opposed to slow, steady change. So that's my thesis basically, but restated in a new way. And then in the next point, you're going to restate the main points, so your examples for violence or nonviolence and how they relate to your thesis. So I talked about revolutionary Russia and how violence in Russia worked better than it would have in India. And then finally your concluding sentence, you really drive your point home and make sure you end with a big bang. Revolution in Russia is a clear example of how violent means of change can result in rapid change that ensures the will of people is felt and heard.